and hosting conversations on science and faith at UCLA. I'd like to thank you for attending this webinar today. Okay, so it's about technology, emotion, and belief in God, and that's Roz and Anne. Next slide, Ricky. I'd like to thank the more than 60 institutions, right, mostly in California, and of which there are at least 60 from UCLA, around 15 from UCI, and around 11 from Stanford, but folks from all across. And so we are grateful for all of you, and especially for 2 homeschoolers. And we don't know where they heard of us, but we're really grateful to have you guys. And if you don't mention your institutions, please forgive us. There are too many. I'm also charged with giving you a brief introduction to the 2 distinguished women academics involved. Both have amazing technical achievements, and both are members of the National Academy of Engineering, but they're also remarkable for their service to the community, demonstrating qualities of both head and heart. It's amazing they've done so much while raising families of their own. Okay, next slide, Ricky. Let me start by talking about Rosalind Picard. I believe you've all come to hear her views on AI and emotion. I first met Roz when we were grad students at MIT. She was a light on campus then and continues to be one. Named one of 7 tech superheroes to watch by CNN, Roz has founded 2 companies based on her research. On the left is Affectiva, which provides emotion AI software where it figures out based on people's faces whether they're enjoying themselves or whether they're engaged. And her latest company is Empatica, which is one of the few FDA cleared smartwatches for detecting things like seizures. And she is her National Academy citation was for contributions to effective and wearable computing. Okay, next slide. But I was also really delighted to hear that Roz co-founded MIT's Mind, Hand, and Heart. It's a well-being initiative on campus. I believe this is a play on MIT's traditional motto of mind and hand and adds the heart. Particularly relevant in this time of COVID, this initiative has done lots of really innovative things, including collating sleep practices. There are sleep champions on the left, as you can see, right? And hosting seminars by institute professors on topics like failure. That's one I would love to hear, having failed several times myself. Next slide. Roz is being interviewed by another accomplished woman. Anne Karagosian is Distinguished Professor in the Department of Mechanical and Aerospace Engineering at UCLA. She heads UCLA's Energy and Propulsion Research Lab with research interests in fluid mechanics and combustion applied to air breathing and rocket propulsion systems. Like Roz, right? Her National Academy citation was for contributions to combustion and engineering and propulsion. Next slide. Like Roz, Anne is also has a distinguished record of service to the community. So, for example, she is the inaugural director of the Promise Armenian Institute, and that has done a lot of things for Armenia, including organizing a one-day international conference in October 2020 to help the community understand the war in Nagorno-Karabakh and Armenia. She helps coordinate medical assistance to this region. Okay, and so you are invited to post questions in the Zoom question and answer. A few questions will be selected for the final segment of our evening. It will be impossible to answer all questions in the given time frame, but we will do our best. And now let me hand over the mic to Anne to begin this conversation on technology, emotion, and belief in God. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much, George. It is an honor for me to interview someone with as distinguished contributions to academia, to technology, and to society as Rosalind Picard. So Roz, we're delighted to have you join us. I wonder if we can be side by side. Are we side by side? It's hard for me to see, but we'll anyway move forward with a series of questions. So by the way, I have not met Roz in person. We just missed each other at one National Academy meeting, but hopefully in the future we will meet in person at one point or another. So Roz, let me begin by asking you to tell us a little bit about your professional life. Where did you go to school? What have been your fields of study and research? And how you wound up as a highly distinguished professor at MIT.
Thanks, Anne. It's such a privilege to be here with you. I started my professional career at Georgia Tech in Atlanta, Ramblin' Wreck from Georgia Tech, as an electrical engineer, designing computers. And from there went on to both AT&T Bell Labs and MIT, where I did master's and doctorate, and then worked as a member of the technical staff at Bell Labs for a while also. And then from there, I joined the faculty at MIT. MIT is kind of incestuous, hiring their own. I did change labs. I moved from the research lab of electronics over to the media lab.
Very good. And tell us a little bit about the research that you do, that you have done, the applications of the research, where the challenges have lain in your research.
Yeah, as an engineer, I was very interested in building computers and algorithms that were optimized to run on them. And one day my advisor thought an architecture I had built was really cool, but he said, what really runs on it? And I thought, well, I've kind of modeled it after some things I imagined the brain was doing. So I started reading a lot more about how the brain worked, thinking we could be, pretty, I mean, it's so awesome, right? Everybody was inspired by, could we build something that works anywhere near as well as the brain? And I might discount my brain late at night here on the East Coast after Zoom all day. But generally speaking, the human brain is just mind blowing. And we forever trying to figure out, like, how does it do it? How does it see and hear and smell and taste and make sense of things and have consciousness and regulate emotion and figure out what's important and what matters? And in such a small, efficient package fed by, jelly donuts and junk food in some cases. So, I was inspired. And as I learned about the brain, focusing mostly on things we thought were happening in the cortex, where we thought all of real intelligence was, I kept running into things in other parts of the brain that were not explained by cortical measures. And in particular, I ran into things that have to do with attention, in memory, memory and emotion, these deeper regions of the brain. And I thought, well, attention, memory, and emotion. Well, attention and memory are important. I don't have anything to do with emotion. A woman trying to be taken seriously in a technical field. And unfortunately, to my horror, as I learned more about what was going on in the brain, I realized there was a lot of important stuff related to emotion that was actually projecting upwards and influencing our intelligence, as well as shaping our perception. And everything I was trying to measure across the board looked like it was influenced by emotion. And I thought, oh, great, it's the last thing I want to deal with. So I started gathering the science on it and running around trying to get some men to work on it, figuring it was the death of my career if I worked on it. Well, that didn't go so well. And so finally I decided I should just write up what I had learned on it. And I had the privilege of being a faculty in the media lab by the point that this was starting to happen. And in the media lab, they encouraged us to take risks and to do things that were crazy. And this was definitely made my palms sweaty, kind of crazy to write about this and put it out. So I took the risk, put it out. My first effort was roundly rejected. It was humiliating, the worst reviews I've ever had in my life. Being in the media lab, there were all these architects and people from different fields who wrote books. And I thought, there's no way I'm going to get this peer-reviewed published given these first round of reviews. It's going to take years to do the work to prove that this stuff I'm doing is valid. So I decided I'll write a book on it, and then I'll get busy on all the peer-reviewed stuff. And the peer-reviewed stuff has now happened. It's huge. There's professional journals and conferences and lots of papers on it now. And now it's actually seen as a field. But at the time it was just sort of a sweat producing, scary thing to think about. So I went out with a book on it called Affective Computing.
That's fascinating. And so the research that you do, it sounds like it straddles, cognitive science, computer science, psychology, and so forth. And are you able to be well recognized in fields outside of engineering and, including psychology, or is this a more difficult area to to get attention.
Actually, it's been surprising how many areas recognize the importance of emotion now. I have been privileged to be a part of speaking opportunities and collaboration opportunities now, a whole lot in psychiatry, in neurology, in psychology, and in education, and across a lot of different areas of medicine, where they recognize that the emotion system communicates with I think every organ in the body, or at least pretty much every organ in the body. And as we try to understand that biochemical and electrical communication and the messages and how they influence healthy function, we see that trying to bring the skills of engineering to measure and understand this emotional information is part of figuring out how to help people be healthy.
Mm-hmm. That's fabulous. Have you found now that you have made a name for yourself in this area, that more men as well as women have been entering into the area, and there's not as much of a stigma?
Oh yeah. It's funny. In the first, I still remember the first time I went to this conference I used to go to every year. It was Computer Vision Pattern Recognition Conference. And I usually published computer vision work and multimodals, signal processing and machine learning work. And I remember when I first released some affective computing work, I heard these people who used to respect me talking behind my back going, have you seen what she's doing now? Like, can you believe it? Like, and they were staying away from me. And I thought, oh, great. My worst fears are being realized and my career is tanked. And then I think it was about 3 or 4 years later, the same person came up to me and said, I'm working on affective computing now. Could I have some of your data? And I was like, sure, happy to share.
That happens in a lot of areas, but I think women sometimes are very susceptible to that kind of response.
Yeah, it helps to get comfortable with being uncomfortable, and to also to do your homework. Make sure that there's real science and real interesting findings before you take those risks. But then if you're scared to do it just because of how it'll make you look, I love what when Richard Feynman wrote his book, What Do You Care What Other People Think? It's a great book to read if you are afraid a lot about what other people think.
That's right. It's a great book. I've read it too. So anyway, the title of our discussion, as you know, is A Conversation with Professor Rosalind Picard of the MIT Media Lab about technology, emotion, and belief in God. So we've spoken a little bit about technology and emotion. So let's get now to belief in God. What can you tell us, Roz, about your religious background? Can you talk to us? Would you be willing to share your religious journey, your upbringing, and so forth? Anything you're open to sharing?
Sure, happy to. Yeah, I was raised in a family where I never really heard anybody talk about religion until one day when I came back from grade school and announced to my mom that I was selected to be head of the debate team on the evolution side, and we were going to crush the creationists on the other side. I was an atheist. I was a very proud atheist. I thought science was my God. And I thought that religious people were just stupid. I'm sorry to all the religious people out there. Now I'm one of them too. So if you think religious people are stupid, I used to think that too. I no longer think that. But at the time, I really had a very arrogant and wrong view of religious people. And I had a lot to learn. I still have a lot to learn. But I started from that point of view, where actually a lot of my colleagues are. And then a neighbor who I babysat for challenged me to actually invited me to a church initially, and I was not interested in going to church. It's the last thing I wanted to do. Not only because I wasn't interested in religion, but because I thought I had to wear a skirt and I wasn't interested in doing that. So it's funny, but these stupid little things sometimes keep people away. You don't have to wear a skirt to go to church. You could go as you are. You can go in jeans. But I told them I had a stomach ache. Well, actually, the guy who invited me was a doctor. And after about 3 weeks in a row of faking stomach aches, he was on to me. And he said, what's most important is not whether you go to church, it's what you believe. Do you know what you believe? I'm like, yeah, I don't believe in God. I don't believe in any of this stuff. And he said, have you read the Bible? Now, as a young person, but still trying to be intelligent, I realized it was the best-selling book of all time. In fact, it's not only the best-selling book, it is so far best-selling across all bestseller lists that they don't even put it first on the bestseller list because it would just be perpetually first. So the bestseller books lists leave it off, but the Bible is the best-selling book of all time and most translated book. And so I thought, okay, you can't really be an educated person without reading the Bible, I don't think. And I'm an educated person, or at least wanted to be. So I started to read the Bible. And I started in Proverbs, where you could read one a day for a month, which is not where people usually tell you to start, but don't start at Genesis. Everybody says don't start at Genesis, but start at Proverbs or start with the New Testament gospel books, Matthew, Mark, Luke, or John. And I started with Proverbs, and that was really good for me because it was full of wisdom, and that my arrogance needed a little bit of a little dose of reality. And as I started reading that, I realized, actually I have a lot to learn here. And I read through the whole Bible multiple times, and it started to, not like I had a neurological disease with voices in my head, but it felt like I was being spoken to. Much like when you have a nagging thought, right? And something is telling you to do something and you can't ignore it. And I started to gradually believe in God, which I didn't like. I didn't want to believe in God, which bothered me. So then I decided to study other world religions. I was in this special program in my high school at this point where I was allowed to study whatever I wanted to. It's a special class they had for some of us. And I got to do my own curriculum. So I studied all the world religions thinking, well, maybe this was just first exposure to religion and this would happen with any of them. So I immersed myself in visiting them and reading their stuff and learning about them. And no, it seemed like there was something about this Judeo-Christian God that was greater than all that. So began a journey of many years of reading and learning until eventually I decided I not only believed in God, but I became a Christian. And it changed my life. It's actually fabulous. So I highly recommend running the experiment if you haven't tried it.
Mm-hmm. That's fascinating. Were there aspects of the person of Jesus of Nazareth that particularly appealed to you, that you embraced the Christian faith?
I had a hard time in the beginning with Jesus of Nazareth. Again, I think my own arrogance and wanting to run my own show got in the way. And I think there's more to Jesus than just an amazing, brilliant teacher. Jesus claimed to be one with God the Father, right? Claimed attributes of deity that were hard to swallow. And also, there was this question that goes beyond what do you believe and goes to how you live your life. It's one thing to believe. It's another thing to change kind of who's in charge of your life. We all ultimately have that freedom to choose that. But we also, I think, don't realize that we often are a slave to something, right? We almost all serve something. And, there's some good rock songs about that, right? You got to serve somebody. We all serve somebody or something, right? Some people serve their resume, right? Some people serve, their stomach. Some people serve their other lusts. And we all serve somebody. And I think, Jesus asks us to deny ourselves and serve the one true God, right? The greatest mind in the universe. I'm like, well, that's, some people think of serving a pretty cool professor or superstar in their field. Well, here's the superstar of all fields, right? The mind behind it all, the very, architect of consciousness and meaning and purpose and everything. So once I was kind of nudged a little bit in that direction, that was a little harder, right? Letting go of choosing to serve that Jesus as Lord. That was a much bigger step.
Oh, yeah.
But turned out to be probably the best one I ever made.
At what point in your life was this happening? Were you in college by this point, or?
Yeah, by this point I was in college. I was a reluctant convert, I guess you could say. It's kind of dragging my feet. I like to test everything. So I would like go in a little bit and then, try to come up with other explanations.
Interesting. Can you talk about how being a Christian impacts your life, impacts your work? I know that's a pretty broad question, but maybe at a micro scale or macro scale, how does it impact you?
Yeah, it absolutely impacts me every day, really. I think the first thing is it just gives me enormous freedom, right? When I get back to the freedom from fear, freedom from fear of what other people think. I care what God thinks, right? All the rest of us are kind of on a different plane. And freedom to make mistakes and still be loved, and then to love others. Actually, this is where it gets a little hard. I'm actually a super nerdy introvert who would happily sit in the corner and read books and not go around, socializing a whole lot. And yet it's actually really healthy to socialize. And the Bible urges you to love others, to not be wrapped up in yourself, do nothing from selfishness or empty conceit, but have humility and to consider others as better than yourself. And that's a really high bar, right? To go out and act in this loving and caring way toward other people. But it has actually hugely informed my work. So in my work where, it might be easy to just pick problems that are, very impressive and that very sophisticated, wealthy, highly educated people are interested in. Instead, I go and find some of the problems that are super hard, but maybe nobody thinks they're that, like the people they help are the people that may be stigmatized in society. For example, I was in China where they were asking, why do you do work to help people who have autism or epilepsy? There's a large set of people over there who believe that those people are being punished in this life for something they did in a previous life. And I'm like, no, my Christian worldview says that all people are created in God's image. We're all equal. It doesn't matter if you have, superhuman intelligence, or if you have, you really struggle, you have less than 10 words, and you maybe have other intellectual challenges. You are still loved by God, and I love you too. And I'm going to try to figure out how to make your life better too. Totally equal to somebody that these super billionaires are trying to make more money from right now. So
Wow.
we've focused our research on helping where there's need, not helping where there's prestige.
And I imagine it influenced your direction in affective computing as well. You had the courage to move in that direction, but you saw the societal types of benefits.
Yeah, it's not only societal benefits, but it's a privilege to work with these different minds. I mean, if you haven't had a chance to get to know somebody on the autism spectrum, you're missing out on an amazing privilege. And people with epilepsy, I mean, they're just amazing minds. And by the way, epilepsy can happen to anybody with a brain, anybody on this call. You may not have it today. You could have it, next month. Just unusual electrical activity, but there's so much fascinating stuff we have to learn from people whose brains work differently. And I just consider it a privilege. Each of these individuals is a gift. And actually the coolest work that we are doing now, all of it grew out of trying to work alongside and understand better the lives of people on the autism spectrum.
That's wonderful. So you've spoken about how being a Christian impacts your professional life and also the reverse. Have you ever experienced a conflict between the science you pursue, the work you pursue, and your faith? And have you struggled with any challenges between the two?
there certainly are the ongoing debates. What does Genesis really mean? When it says, the world was made in 7 days, or like, I don't think that. I mean, certainly a lot of Christians don't think that those are literal 24-hour days. There are lots of challenges that you hear debated all the time, but in terms of my personal work or being a scientist, there's really no conflict at all. In fact, there's centuries of scientists much greater than I see etched in stone at MIT, Newton and Faraday and all these others who were devout Christians, and they weren't just like Christians in name, like it was just you were a Christian at that time. These guys studied and wrote more about the Bible than their own math and science. Isaac Newton did. So they took it very seriously. In fact, they even argued, and I think that this is something we should think about more these days, that like the whole pursuit of science is presupposing that there's meaning and order and purpose. It's not just all random and purposeless. And if it really is meaning and order and purpose, then that's what we're learning from. If that's the frame, then where does that come from, right? That a random model doesn't, random purposeless stuff doesn't suddenly create all that, right?
Absolutely. And the mathematics behind it is quite beautiful as well. So
yeah. Oh, and there's so much gorgeous math too, right? Like that doesn't seem, to make sense if you don't think that there's some great mind behind all of this.
Absolutely. Well, let me ask you what some might consider to be a sort of hot button question. So today we find ourselves in the United States where we see a great deal of division, certainly politically, but also actually in American churches. And in some cases, some of the conflicts have arisen because of the connection, let's say, or the influence of American politics in the church. Do you have any views on that connection, whether it's a healthy thing, whether it's a logical thing of concern? I'll leave it up to you to.
Yeah. Oh my goodness. What a crazy time our country has just been through. Thankfully, we're at peace right now. One of my colleagues was pointing out, I like at the time when there was just almost the height of partisan strife, I loved that our healthcare workers were taking care of people no matter, without even asking them whether they were Republican or Democrat or who they voted for, right? And you think about it, if somebody's injured or has an accident in front of your house, you run out to help them, right? You don't think about their political position. And yet our nation was almost like so obsessed with this that we were forgetting that we're human beings first, and that there's so much more to us than that kind of an issue, set of issues. So I'm actually really disturbed by how much our nation let our press and politics get out of whack. I actually went and looked up online recent surveys on honesty and dishonesty, and which professions are viewed as most honest and dishonest. And no surprise to me, nurses and doctors were at the top. Engineers were actually at the top for most honest, which made me feel really good. Look at us, and both of us engineers, and our grade school teachers. And military leaders were at the top too. My dad was in the military, so that makes me feel good. He was certainly very trustworthy. At the bottom, though, guess who was most dishonest? Anybody want to guess? Our political leaders, Congress, but not just Congress, newspaper reporters and TV reporters also. And I have seen this too. There's so much bias and, bad behavior. I mean, there's a lot of great ones too. But I think the bar has really dropped, and, it'd be nice if we could raise it again to where it used to be called statesmen or statesperson. People who people respect in society get chosen to be leaders, and they're more interested in doing good for society than they are in being reelected. And that would, I think, do us a lot of good. I see both parties as both have some positions that I think are good for justice and mercy and bringing about important changes we need in America. And I wish we could put as much energy into furthering good things, good progress on those issues as we do into fighting between the parties.
Good, thank you. So let me ask you, before we go soon to the questions that people have been posing, do you have any words of advice or encouragement that you would like to offer, especially to young scientists and engineers who might be questioning the directions in their work, questioning spiritual things, whether this is real, whether it's not? Are there possibly writers or books that you might want to recommend? What would be your advice, especially to the younger crowd? I think we have quite a few of them out there.
Yeah, for young people who are, first of all, if you're young and you're a Christian, please be encouraged. There's a lot of smart Christian. I'm not the only one in MIT. We have tons of Christians on the faculty, and faculty, staff, students. Maybe a lot of them aren't quite as bold about speaking out, and I appreciate that. There are people who will, I would say, misjudge. They will judge. I think they will very often misjudge. There's a lot of false conceptions about Christians out there, and I think Christians need to speak out about what's true instead of letting these false beliefs keep getting promoted, just like all the other false news. We've got to start correcting what Christians believe and who we are, because there's a lot of us, and it's time to stop being so mousy, stop being the shrinking violets, and speak the truth. If you're not a Christian, and that's fine too, I really encourage you to ask questions. It's great you're here listening, and feel free to ask questions tonight, and learn. There's a lot of great stuff to learn. One of my favorite books to start people with, if you want a little short readable classic, is C.S. Lewis's Mere Christianity. But nothing is as good as reading the Bible. And you can get free versions of it. I don't own stock in any of these. I don't even know if they charge anybody, but companies like YouVersion as a free Bible app. I think that's the most downloaded one, but I'm sure there's others too. That one has lots of translations. Pick your language, pick your translation. It's free. Get it on your phone. You can read it, and I highly recommend that for starting to learn, and try to find people to read it with, other people who know more than you or less. Most schools, universities have Bible study groups where you can, just like you'd have a reading group for machine learning or journal papers or whatever, you can have a reading group around the Bible and learn about it. And I think that's great. Ask questions and learn would be my advice.
Fantastic. Thank you. Okay, well, I think I'll go now to a few of the questions that have been curated by Professor Jonathan Mitchell of UCLA. So the first one is this: what would a faith-based policy on technology look like in today's world, if such a thing would exist? Faith-based policy.
Faith-based policy.
Meaning to technology.
If it's like national, probably maybe we would want to say like faith informed or something. The Bible speaks quite a bit about justice, and we don't have justice in the U.S. today. There was a cartoon sent around that I loved the other day that I saw, and it showed the difference between justice and inequality and equity. And it showed a giant tree filled with apples. Actually, one side of the tree had a lot of apples, the other side didn't have many. And there was a person under each side of the tree. And so the person standing under the side that didn't have many apples, of course, it was not equitable, right? They're not getting as many apples. So somebody said, let's make it equitable. Let's give them each a ladder. And to be equal, we'll give them the same height ladder, right? Well, so they both climb up on this equal height ladder, but it turns out that actually the side of the tree that's not giving me any apples is also too high. So same height ladder, but this person still can't reach the apples. So to be equitable, they give the side with the higher tree a higher ladder so they can reach the apples. And now it's equitable, but it's still really not just, because this person's still having to do more work, right? They're having to climb this higher ladder. I'd say a lot of the world right now, we've been moving things to be a little bit more equitable, but it's still not just. In the last panel of the cartoon, they're fixing the tree so that it's, sort of equal balance of apples and equally able to be reached. And I think it's an image to help us look in our own lives and around us at every policy we make and think about, are we not just being equitable, but are we really moving and changing things so that they're more just? And again, recognizing if it's Christian worldview informed, all people have equal worth.
Thank you. Okay, our next question is, have you often gotten challenged at MIT by secular faculty or school leaders or students? Do you actually share the gospel with your students and colleagues at work at MIT? Is it hard or easy to be a Christian at MIT?
Mm-hmm. I have only been, in private, some colleagues will talk, and some, are very much where I used to be. Like, how can you believe that? That's crazy. Like, you lost your marbles. And because that's exactly what I used to think. And some of them think that. And I appreciate if they come to me with that as opposed to behind my back. It's very ineffective to complain about people behind their back. We've had great conversations, and we're really good friends. It's interesting. You'd think they would want to avoid me, but we've actually become really great friends. And I don't demand people see the world the way I do, and vice versa. I actually really, we're all made differently for different, paths, and I think it's good to honor and respect that people aren't all going to think the same. So we get along great. I share openly my faith. I actually think it's more important than ever to share it now, because there's a lot of data recently showing that regular religious practice, and while it didn't prove that it's Christian practice, all the studies happen to be done with Christians where there's lots of data, but the regular religious practice is actually hugely associated with better health outcomes, not just physical health, but mental health. And that's even with excellent statistics controlling for things like just social interaction. There are a lot of components that are really beneficial. So if you were to take this and make it non-secular and put it in an app, and and you look at the improvement it gives people, it would absolutely be downloaded by everybody. So just for your own physical and mental health, I think it makes a lot of sense to figure out what you believe and, try engaging in some religious community regularly. And in particular, while not every Christian community is perfectly healthy, there certainly are some cases where there's been horrible abuses, like in any organization. And I'm not going to condone any of that. There's horrible things there that need to change. But by and large, you get in a healthy Christian community, regular practice is going to lead to a lot of benefits.
Thank you. So here's an intriguing question, slightly related. Does a measurement of emotion, or the ability to measure emotion, replace the need for a creator God, if you can quantify it?
Does measurement of emotion replace the need for a creator God who can quantify it? Let me say a little bit more about what we mean when we say we measure emotion. So emotion is a lot of things. Emotion, like suppose take the emotion of being happy, right? Somebody smiles, like that was just a fake smile, right? So it doesn't mean I'm happy. But actually, as I sort of laugh at how stupid my fake smile looked, I actually have like a genuine smile. And it's a fleeting moment of happiness, right? And it's not, and that doesn't equal when people say that they're happy with life, right? Like parents who've been up all night taking care of a new baby, and they've been miserable changing the dirty diaper, and they're miserably tired and they're miserably stressed. They will still check the box saying, I'm very happy with my life, right? Even though they're not feeling happy at that moment. So happy has lots of complicated components. And we can't, when the computer measures it, it's measuring only the objective, or it can measure your subjective self-report, right? Like on a survey. But what we've done is we'll do things like look at the muscle movements changing on your face. And we'll say, well, that's a smile. And that's kind of a slow building smile. And it involves the muscles that are frequently associated with happy, but it also involves these muscles associated with frustration. When you smile and you're like, I'm frustrated at this. So it has to look at more than just those muscle movements. It has to look at their temporal patterns, the situation you're in, and a lot more. And even then, it's never 100. It's rarely 100% sure. It's usually just got some pretty good probabilities. So that's what we say recognizing emotion is. That is not the same as knowing what you feel inside, right? It's recognizing what a camera sees. It's recognizing what a microphone hears. It is recognizing more than what people see. We can use a camera to read your heart rate, your respiration, and a lot of other things that people don't see. And that is a little scary, especially because I just learned of some other bad uses going on with that right now that makes me sick. And I think we need regulations around some of this, yesterday to make some of this happen in more protective ways. But it does not equal what God knows about us. It certainly does not replace that. I mean, we're talking about the mind behind the whole universe here, that and what we do is pathetic compared to that.
Thank you. Here's more of a technical question. What do you think about the gut-brain connection?
Uh-huh.
Can that connection be measured? And more generally, is there evidence that you've measured for there being a second brain associated with the gut? Or so generally,
yeah. I recommend Michael Gerson's book, The Second Brain. I think the gut brain is fascinating. And now with the gut microbiome findings too, where we can use machine learning and pattern recognition to understand a lot more of how our diet and our stress and different pathogens we might accidentally consume are affecting that, which then is affecting our health in lots of other ways. No, it's a fascinating area, great area to work on. And one of my dreams would be to have like a little sensor, little safe digital tapeworm or whatever that could, monitor and truly understand, get a better biochemical readout continuously of all of that stuff, and understand its effect on people. We now know a lot more about how our emotions and hopefully soon our gut brain affect our not just our health, but our thinking, our perception, and our emotion regulation, our stress regulation, anxiety. And these are really good things to learn about. There's anxiety as a disorder affects, I believe it's more than 280 million people worldwide, and more than 260 million are affected by depression. And these two often go together. And if you have anxious depression, it's even worse. So the more we can learn about this and how our diet and our behaviors, especially sleep regularity and social interaction, affect it, the more I think we can do things there. By the way, religion, a relationship with Jesus, I have seen over and over how much that helps people regulate stress and anxiety, both in my personal life and in the lives of lots of diverse people. There is so much there to help with that it's very powerful and just very effective, just practically. If you think meditation is effective, try prayer. I think it's even better.
Great, thank you. So this question comes from an 8-year-old listener. He or she says, hello, I'm 8 years old. What was your favorite subject when you were 8 years old? And I might add, do you think that kind of affected the trajectory of your life and your career from the time you were 8?
Yeah, wow. When I was 8, I think that was probably 3rd grade for me. And it was probably math. I always liked math. I didn't like science. It's funny, I love science now. Science is interesting now because now my science is all focused on things I don't know that aren't in the back of the book. It's all like an exploration, it's adventure and discovery. In grade school, science was like boring memorization of things that like people already knew. It was not the way science really works. So it was probably math back then.
Okay, thanks. Someone asks, although you did address this a little bit, how have your religious beliefs influenced your research, or have your beliefs influenced them in effective computing?
Yeah, they've not only, the thing I mentioned earlier was how I think they've made me feel free to take risks. They've made me feel that all people are equally valued so that I can work on problems that deal with stigmatized conditions or things that other people really didn't want to deal with. Another area is they've made me want to have the highest quality in what I do, because I believe that everything we do should be done for God's glory. And what does that mean? Well, if you're Michelangelo, you try to make the most beautiful art there is. If you're just Roz, you just try to do the best science and engineering that you can do. And you know that by trying to do your best there, you're maybe going to get a little closer to learning more about how amazing our minds are and the universe is. And it's like getting a slightly larger glimpse of that truth beyond that we only see like through a veil darkly right now, as 1 Corinthians 13 says, we see now through a glass dimly. But then face to face, then when is then? Then is like the great adventure beyond this life and beyond this universe. And to see the mind behind it all face to face, like, wow, so I just want to do my best work now, the highest quality that we can. And, when we make mistakes, try to catch them and fix them, be honest. And nobody's perfect. And we just, forge ahead, do the very best we can. That has actually led to some big changes in my work too. Like one day I was combing through the details of this data we had, and there was this big peak that I couldn't explain. And I was scratching my head over it, and darn it, our stupid hand-built sensors are broken again, and I'm like trying to figure out what's causing this peak, but this peak was really unusual. It didn't look like when the sensors break. I've looked at a lot of broken data. And the more I went after, I thought, I can't just leave this alone. I want to understand everything. I want to get this knowledge and understanding. And as I tracked down the cause of this, I learned about a little boy having a seizure. And that led to, I didn't know anything about seizures or epilepsy. I had to look it up online. And the more I learned about it, the more I learned that, wow, I need to shift the work I'm doing. I was working on stress and autism. I'm detecting little peaks related to stress. We get this giant peak that I thought was sensor error. And then I discovered it wasn't sensor error. It was a huge electrical seizure in the brain, causing a signal on the wrist, on one wrist, not both wrists. Usually stress affects both wrists. And turns out you can have an electrical event in one part of your brain, and it actually can ipsilaterally on the same side affect a large electrodermal peak on that wrist. And that's what we were seeing. But I didn't know it at the time. But because of my ethic to try to do the best science, I chased down the peak, and with the help of a big team at Children's Hospital Boston, ran a study with 90 children, and we learned that these events were regularly happening with generalized tonic-clonic seizures called grand mal seizures, which are most dangerous kind of seizure. And if you have them or you know somebody who has them, please make sure that they are not alone when they have them. Later, we wound up taking our research device built for stress, and that's what led to this product that was mentioned in my introduction. This is the Embrace 2 made by Empatica. It's Italian for empathetic, and it's out there now. It's actually to my knowledge, it's the only FDA cleared smartwatch right now. And it not only tells time and measures your steps and your sleep, but it will send an alert to somebody to come and check on you if you have a grand mal seizure, which is very important because most people recover just fine after a grand mal seizure, but there's a very small but real probability that you will, after it looks like the seizure has ended, the seizure can move into a part of your brain and cause you to stop breathing. And you want somebody there for that because they can actually restart your breathing by repositioning you sometimes, or turning you over or giving you other kinds of first aid. It's not 100% perfect, but we believe we're told in many cases it's helped save lives now.
Fantastic. Thank you. I guess we have time for maybe just a couple more questions. Here's an interesting one, especially in light of the way most of us have been living during the pandemic. This question says, has technology made our emotions or attentions as humans more unnatural? That is to say, are we getting stimulated and engaging so much with digital media, digital things, rather than real people, that it's causing our behavior and our emotions to be unnatural?
Yeah. Could be. It could be. It's unnatural for us to stare at screens instead of at each other. For example, I think we're all used to turning and orienting a lot more in a normal conversation. And I worry now that we're all getting like stiff and we're losing our peripheral vision and our lateral movement. If you're like me and you're spending most of your day talking to people on Zoom. Thank you all for being here. I know being zoomed out all day is hard. So yeah, I do think that extensive use like this is not good. I'm actually more worried about some other things. I'm more worried about people in the physical world when they approach each other now, when you're out walking on the sidewalk or whatever, and they no longer acknowledge each other's presence. They cross the street, they cross the sidewalk, they act as if everybody else is a social outcast. And when we do that to each other, especially a person maybe you're the only person they're seeing that day, or, I think it's heartbreaking. I think we need to, smile above the mask or use these clear masks that the deaf community has built, some of which are FDA approved. And they're so nice. You can see and share a smile. You, at a distance, you can pull down the mask and smile like when you're far enough away outdoors, it's not going to hurt them. And provided you're not sick and sneezing on them or something. But I think we are sending unhealthy messages to each other a lot right now. And that's actually hurting. It's not helping with the mental health crisis. And there really is a mental health crisis right now too, with people's isolation, with not getting out, with not connecting, with not sharing smiles, not sharing physical synchrony and things that people do that have been studied by scientists like Barbara Fredrickson that talk about positive resonance, that has been really rigorously studied, and it's good for mental health, and we're not getting it.
Thank you. I think maybe we have time for one more question. I'll pose this. So this person asks, almost all religions tend to be patriarchal by nature. And it becomes increasingly hard to reconcile faith, religion with gender equality and women's rights. Do you have thoughts on how to raise strong women who can challenge the stereotypes that perhaps persist in certain faith communities and in perhaps religious texts?
Mm-hmm. There's certainly a lot of misunderstandings, I think, of what Christianity teaches. There's room for some varied views, but there's also some misunderstandings. So I highly recommend doing a little bit more scholarly work, in particular in Christianity. Now, I won't go into, I think there are some real differences in some of the other world religions like Islam. It's very different. But in Christianity, if you look at how Jesus treated women, it was radical for his day. He goes to the woman at the well who even the other women wouldn't talk to because she had multiple husbands. And there he is, a Jew, and she, I believe, was a Samaritan or whatever. She was not considered like worthy of a Jewish man talking to, and yet he treated her with love and respect. And over we see Jesus treating women not the way that their society did. So I think if, there are groups of people who, twist the scriptures or don't really learn what Jesus did. But if you really look at it and, get informed, I think you'll find that it's very liberating for women. Christianity is really recognizing that, we're all made in God's image, and there's great equality and opportunity there.
Great, thank you. Thank you so much, Roz. This has just been a fascinating conversation. I could go on and on with more questions, but I believe I am getting the cue that we are nearly at the end point. So thank you so much. This is wonderful, especially given it's quite late where you are. We deeply appreciate this.
Thank you for inviting me. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you. So I think I'll turn things over now to Professor Vivian Liu. Is this right? Yes, there you are.
Very simply, thank you, Dr. Rosalind Picard, and thank you, Dr. Ann Karagosian, for leading the discussion tonight. And to all of our honored attendees, thank you very much for making the time to be with us tonight. We hope that tonight's talk stimulated thought on faith and on science. And everyone, please have a safe evening. Good night, wherever you are, or good morning, maybe wherever you are. Have a wonderful time. Bye-bye.